Welcome to A Pair of Bookends, the book club you can carry anywhere. I'm your host, Hannah MacDonald, and I'll be bookending the conversation with some of the most exciting voices from the bookish world. Welcome to another episode in our debut Spotlight series, where we shine a light on the freshest authors and their work. Today, that spotlight is on Charlotte Cross and her debut novel, The Brides, a gloriously gripping, unsettling feminist gothic horror about the three women who became the brides of Dracula and the fourth who managed to escape. Author of The Brides, Charlotte Cross, is a writer based in central Scotland. She grew up in southern England in a small town with a rich history, where she spent many hours at the local museum where her grandmother was a volunteer. Charlotte writes historical fiction, having long been fascinated by stories of the past. In October 2019, Charlotte had the first sparks of an idea for this book and went on to sign up for the Oxford University Advanced Creative Writing course. Her novel The Brides will be published by Tor in the UK next week, and I'm so excited to be chatting all about it with Charlotte today. Welcome, Charlotte, to A Pair of Bookends.
Hi, thank you so much for inviting me on.
Thank you so much for joining me. I have been completely immersed in the world of your novel this weekend, and I don't know if that's the reason why I've not slept for most of the weekend. Because I felt so on edge reading it, but also because I was so gripped and didn't want to put it down. It is such a brilliant book, and I'm so excited to get into talking about it. But I do always start by asking what you're currently reading.
Well, first off, thank you very much for the compliment. That's amazing. At the moment, I am treating myself to a reread of Dracula because it has been years since I've read the whole thing cover to cover. While I was drafting, I treated it almost like a reference, like I have to go in and check details. But yeah, I have a lovely new Penguin Classics beautiful copy, and
gorgeous.
I've been reading through that because my old copy, my Penguin Classics copy, is held together with tape and hope because it's so overused. So I've been treating myself to that reread and like re-immersing myself in Bram Stoker's original vision and world, and just enjoying it, really. I love rereading books, especially ones that I love so much. It's such a wonderful kind of way to re-experience the novel because everything feels different every single time.
Yeah.
And having written The Brides, reading Dracula now, it's a whole new experience.
Well, I told you before we started recording that I have done it the wrong way round, and I haven't yet read Dracula. I've read your novel first.
No, it will be great. It will be great because I think we were talking about how Dracula is so present in our culture. Everyone knows this character, who he is, what he can do. So I don't think having read Dracula first is necessary.
Yeah.
But probably you'll have like a slightly different experience.
Yeah.
Which is still fantastic. I'm so interested to hear what you think when you do read Dracula, and if you can pick up on all the little things that I put in, the little Easter eggs and the little nods. And yeah, I think just even if someone hasn't read Dracula, I think they're still going to really enjoy The Brides.
Oh, absolutely. Like like I said, I know from what I've absorbed from the culture, but that's it. I haven't actually read the source, and yeah, I had so much fun with this book, and I really enjoyed it. And I don't think you need to have read Dracula in order to enjoy this book. Definitely not. I really want to ask you where your sort of interest in history began, because obviously, as I said in my intro, you know, this is historical fiction is something that you've always been drawn to. But is it just in terms of the books you're reading, or is it also like certain aspects of history that you were interested in? Could you tell us a bit about that?
Oh, it's everything. Everything. Like, I've always read historical fiction. One of the very first, like, in quotes, grown-up books I remember reading as a child was Alfred, King of the English.
Oh, I haven't heard of that.
I've completely forgotten the author. I don't think it's a massively well-known book, but I grew up in a town called Wantage in Oxfordshire, which is the birthplace of King Alfred. It's a big deal to the town, and there's a kind of a consciousness in the town of like that aspect of history, and there's a lot of places of like famous battles around, and it's sort of almost semi-legendary now, some of the things that went on in his reign. And the local museum where you mentioned in the intro, my grandmother was a volunteer for many years, has a lot of sort of Saxon history and artifacts and those kind of things. And she used to volunteer on Thursday afternoons, and my mum would take me there after school, and I would go and wander around the Free Museum by myself, just wander around and look at all the exhibits, and then we'd have cake. So that was positive reinforcement, I think,
Oh my God.
for my love of
Perfect.
history. Yeah, so I think that's probably where it started when I was really, really young. And it's just gone from there. I still love going to see a museum or a castle and getting cake after. I do that all the time.
It's a perfect day out, isn't
Oh,
it?
absolutely. Yeah, especially I live in Scotland now, and so there's so much more history to explore. I feel like
Yeah.
I'm learning all this new stuff because I'm really familiar with English history, but not so much with Scottish history. So
Yeah.
it's a lot of it's new to me and it's fantastic. It's just, yeah, I'm enjoying learning about it so much and visiting all these great historic sites and eating cake.
Always cake. If
Always,
something's
always.
if you're having a bad day, cake. If you're having a good day, cake. It's got to be done. I I mean I love that, and I love hearing about the things that have influenced writers. And I wonder, as somebody that, as you're saying, you're sort of learning about Scottish history now. Is there a danger as somebody that's writing historical fiction to be like, there's too many ideas of things that I want to write about now?
Yes. Oh, yes. My writer's notebook is full to bursting. There are so many ideas. We went to Aberdour Castle in Fife not long ago on a really like drizzly grey day. And my partner and I were the only people like going around the castle at that time. And it's mostly a ruin-ish. And I went on ahead and then I couldn't find him. So me, like gothic historical novelist, I'm alone in this gloomy ruined castle in the rain. And I freaked myself out so badly because I started to it's going to show up in a novel at some point in the future because like my imagination just started to run wild. So yes, there are always too many ideas. All the time, always. I won't live long enough to like write all of the novels I want to write.
It's devastating when you realize that, isn't it? It's like when you realize that
Mm-hmm.
you'll never be able to read all the books that you want to read in your
Yep,
lifetime. It's
exactly.
heartbreaking. I would love to ask you about your debut journey because I believe you had this idea in October 2019, as I
Hmm.
said in my intro. How different was that initial idea from the book that you have now?
Not at all different. The
Okay.
initial idea was it is pretty much fully realized in the brides. The versions that we went through on the way, we being me, my beta readers, my agent, then my editor, were in some ways some bits were quite different, but we were like I was always going to the same place. We're always ending up at Dracula's castle. We're always going to have someone who manages to escape and tell the story, and three women who don't make it out. So yeah, it was very, very similar to the original germ of the idea that I had.
What was that initial inspiration?
Okay, this is quite a
I
thing.
have no idea where you're about to take me.
Um, so it's October 2019, and it was a rainy, gloomy Sunday afternoon in Oxford, where I was living at the time. And I went into a bookshop to kind of wander around, as you do on a rainy, gloomy
Yeah.
afternoon in Oxford. And I picked up a book called Who is Dracula's Father,
Oh,
which is and Other Puzzles in Bram Stoker's Gothic Masterpiece by Professor John Sutherland. And I thought, oh, I love Dracula. That sounds really interesting. And one of the essays in this book was called Why Do the Brides of Dracula Speak English? And I
mm.
was reading this essay and I was like, that is nonsense. That can't be right. That makes no sense. And then I went back through my very battered copy of Dracula held together with tape and hope. And yeah, you absolutely can read it like that. You can read it that these three women in the middle of the Transylvanian forest are English speakers. And I just that just stuck in my head. That stuck in my head, and I couldn't get that idea out. And at the time, I say living in Oxford, I was living in the suburb of Littlemore, which has a very famous mental hospital, which
Yeah.
only closed in the 90s actually. And from my flat, you could see it. You could see the mental hospital, the old buildings, which is all flats now. And something of that kind of seeped into my
Mm.
brain as well. So on this rainy October night, those two things sort of like came together in my brain, and I could start to feel the shape of it already. The frame narrative in Littlemore Mental Hospital, and the main narrative of these three women journeying from England to Transylvania, and three of them not escaping and staying there forever. So
Oh
yeah,
my God, I
it's a
cannot
journey.
believe you just picked up a book on a whim and were
Hmm.
like, that looks interesting. And
Yep.
then from reading one thing that's sparked something to bring us this. I mean,
Yep.
I absolutely love that. I think that's such an amazing backstory for this book. I'm really interested in things like that. And I really want to start by asking you about the sort of opening of your novel. So your novel opens in 1903 with Sir John Seward. Is that how I say
Yeah,
his
I
name?
think so.
Yes,
Yeah.
who has arrived at Littlemore, that you just mentioned, having previously worked in a much smaller, they would have called it an asylum.
Yeah.
And the patient that is brought into him is a woman whose mental health issues have worsened due to sort of past trauma, let's say. And obviously, during this period, mental illness would have been perceived in a very different way. There are some things that maybe weren't mental illness that would have been sort of dismissed as such because they were quite dismissive of it at the time. And I wondered, in terms of your research process, what it was like looking into how those things were treated in that time, and also, being so close to Littlemore, what that experience was like writing about it.
So writing about it, I was working on this novel during the pandemic, obviously, and my partner and I used to go for like our little pandemic walks
Oh,
around the
wow.
those buildings. And online, like you can see the maps and things from when
Yeah.
it was built. So I tried to make that like as real and true to life as I could. So that was fairly easy in that sense. But in terms of the difference between sort of, some of it's quite distressing,
Yeah.
like researching mental illness and
Yeah.
the treatment of mental illness at that time. And I do try to address it a
Yeah.
bit because even in the novel Dracula, Dr. Seward, John Seward, he's quite forward thinking for his time in the 1890s when Dracula is set. And I carried that forward so that he wants to bring the hospital into the new century because was not interested in re-traumatizing this character.
Yeah, fair.
But they do talk about it. They talk about what treatments she's experienced and how they don't work. So it's really challenging to walk that line. Even in the terminology that they use, I wanted to be really
Yeah.
careful to use terminology that was true to the time,
Hmm.
but also not that would be just jarring and offensive and
Yeah.
upsetting to the modern reader.
Yeah.
And they didn't have any quite the concept of an understanding of PTSD that we do, but that is what she has. She has
Yeah.
PTSD with this added kind of supernatural dimension layered over the top. It was really important for me to it to feel grounded and real,
Yeah.
but not to kind of impart any of the distress to the reader
Yeah.
that I felt when I was doing the research, because
Of
some of it's
course.
just so appallingly brutal
Yeah.
that, if it didn't serve the plot, which it didn't, I didn't want to see it.
No, I think that's completely fair, and I think you've balanced that really well in terms of staying true in terms of the historical fact, but then also not, as you said, re-traumatizing the modern reader, which is important, and like you said, it is very distressing to read about that stuff. Oh, I have a quote here actually, which is from one of your characters, Lucy, from her journal, and it is about another character, but I just thought it was really poignant in the sense of what we've just been speaking about, and in terms of the treatment of women and women's mental health. And she says, "I do not like to use the word hysterical of another woman, as it is so often used to pathologize perfectly acceptable emotions in the female sex." And I wondered if you could speak a little bit to that sort of thought that Lucy has.
Yeah, so it's important to note first off that Lucy is extremely educated, even for her time, and she has access to her sort of guardian, the family where she
Yes.
lives, the dad's library, which is very extensive. So she's using that terminology because she's read about it, and she's very kind of intellectually curious, so that's how she knows that. And she's talking about a very specific situation, and Lucy feels quite strongly in a lot of different circumstances the kind of benevolent sexism she experiences in her society. So
Yeah.
she's just travelled from London to Whitby and she can't go on her own. She needs a chaperone because even though she's a perfectly capable young woman, she needs someone to mind her.
Mm.
And she's kind of experiencing that just constantly all the time, this benevolent sexism, and it's sort of part of that. So men who want to kind of shut women away and be like, oh, the poor dear, maybe the poor dear, she's a hysteric, we'll just
Yeah.
tuck her away. But she is also responding to something which is very shocking and very dark. And so she doesn't want to say, oh, this woman has hysteria. She wants to look behind what is presenting. She wants to understand the kind of fundamental humanity of what the person she's hearing about has done. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But I wanted to put those words in Lucy's thought process.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to address what might have been considered mad actions and to kind of address that.
I think it's really interesting as well what you were just saying about sexism, and I think, you know, the way you explore the sort of differences in equality, which, you know, would have been historically accurate, like it's really kind of grim. You know, these women even have this sort of awareness of like how, whether they're being appropriate around men or if they're left alone in a room with a man, and would it be deemed appropriate, and it seeps into their, like, you know, every interaction that they're having to constantly think through it. And you think, I mean, as modern as a modern woman, I think that I often do have to think through those interactions, but maybe not to that extent. I think it's just, maybe it's in a different way now in terms of, I don't know, I just think it brings up a lot of questions about equality and whether we still have those same issues now, and how they come up differently. It just made me think about those things a lot.
Yeah, I think it is true. I think we do have to still do that. It's more probably as modern women, it's much more about safety. Then they're sort of thinking about safety and their reputation, what people might think. But it's very similar in a lot of ways, I think.
Yeah, you've articulated that much better than I did.
Well, later on in the book, a character is deciding whether or not to get in a carriage and accept a lift from an acquaintance of a family. And due to like a set of difficult circumstances, she's been left alone at night on a city street.
Yes.
And things are getting very scary. And she has to make that choice. Do I try and get home?
Yes.
Or do I accept a lift from this person who is probably not safe, which is the more dangerous option for me? And I think that calculus still shows up similarly in modern life.
Oh, it absolutely does. Absolutely does. 100%. Before we move on to talking about the brides, I want to ask you about Dr. Knight, who is somebody that John works with on this specific case. And throughout their working relationship, we understand that although Dr. Knight is more than competent in her field, this is again in terms of equality, women aren't as well respected in this position as, say, John would be, or as a man would be. Where did Dr. Knight's story come from?
So Dr. Knight was actually one of the very first characters I started writing, and the character was always the same. The scenarios were a little bit different, the scenes were a little bit different, but she is, and I hope this comes through, she is extremely tough, extremely practical.
Yes.
The London School of Medicine for Women had already been established, but not for very long, so women could go and get medical training. And she's also been in India, which was under colonial rule at the time, and so there was a little bit more wiggle room for someone to be working in the British Raj than in Britain itself. But she has had to be extremely determined all the way along. And I think in the very first scene, even though the scene is from John Seward's point of view, I think you can see the calculations that Dr. Knight is making. Is this person going to be a problem? Is he going to judge me for being a woman, or is he going to take me on my own merits, on my expertise? But she's in a position of quite a lot of power, and she knows it.
Yeah.
And she works very hard. It's the case of a woman having to work twice as hard as a man, or more than twice as hard as a man, to get the same respect and recognition. But while her story is, like, obviously she's a fictional character, but it's not beyond the bounds of possibility that a woman could be in that position and could have had that journey. But it would have been hard.
Yes. No, absolutely. And I think, as you said before, like, John Seward does have this very modern approach to it, and he does acknowledge that she probably hasn't been treated very well in this profession, or she's not been deemed as competent as a man would have been. So yeah, it was really interesting to sort of explore their dynamic and how that sort of grows and changes as the story goes along. I'm not going to give any spoilers, so we will move on now to the brides, and I want to know what building up their sort of backstory was like for you.
Well, I started because I was so new. This is my first book. I've never written a novel before. I've never finished writing a novel before. And so I felt very de-skilled. So I looked for a lot of different advice online from kind of reputable reputable sources, but one of the pieces of advice I got was to write character sheets and
Oh.
describe all of the characters and what do they look like and what do they like and dislike and what do they want. And it was really key, apparently, to decide what each character really wants. And I ran with that. So every character, what they want is like a really central driving force of the narrative, which is why there's so much yearning.
Yes.
So much yearning.
So much.
Because that's like a really big push for every single character who appears, what they want, what they're yearning for, longing for, working towards. So that was a big part of creating these characters. But they were very, in some ways, straightforward. In some of them more straightforward than others, but those character sheets, I'm not sure if I would 100% recommend them, because most of the things I thought at the beginning of the novel turned out not at all to be the right thing or to be true. But it was just one of the characters in particular very much appeared sort of in my mind fully formed, the character of Mafalda,
Yes.
who is my anti-heroine. At least I conceive of her as my anti-heroine. And in fact, in my second draft, I liked her so much she started to get a bit too nice. So I had to go back, and in my third draft I had to put her back to her like anti-heroine ways, and she was really kind of fully formed. Others needed a bit more refining and a bit more work. But it's amazing to me, like throughout the process of creating these new characters rather than engaging with the ones from Dracula, it amazes me how much just sort of arises from the subconscious. I understand why people in like ancient times or whenever thought of the muse, or the muse comes to you and inspires you, because it doesn't feel conscious, a lot of it. And I think it sounds very strange to say out loud, but I think a lot of writers will know what that is like. Writers and creative people know what that's like. So some of it is craft, like sitting down and thinking with those character sheets, like what do they look like, what do they want, and some of it's this kind of artistic muse amorphous thing, and then it just happens, and then they're sort of stepping off the page and taking over your life and not doing what you want them to do as an author.
I love that so much. I think it's really interesting because I'm an actor, and it's also a big thing for actors when we're given a script to decide what our characters' wants are. So I think it's really interesting that was such a driving force for you. And I love you telling us about Mafalda and how she changed so much, and you ended up, you wanted one thing for her, but because you liked her so much, she became a bit too endearing. But I really enjoyed her trajectory, and I don't want to spoil anything, so please do tell me at any point if I'm getting into spoiler territory. But I really loved the dynamic between Mafalda and Lucy, and I wondered if you could speak a little bit to that and what it is safe for us to talk about, because I was unsure.
Well, Mafalda and Lucy are in love. They have been in love.
We can say this. Okay, great.
We
can
say
fine,
it. We can
great.
Absolutely say it, because it's an important part of the novel.
Yes.
And I knew that I knew that the narrative needed quite a lot of tension in their relationship, and if they were not romantically involved, there would not be that tension. And it just felt very easy to do, because they can hide almost in plain sight. They can hide their relationship, like letters from women in that era to us read as being quite romantic. Maybe some of those friendships were more than friendships, but they read as being romantic. So that aspect of their relationship can just hide in, oh, they're very close friends. They were roommates, like the meme. And they just are, they're very in love, but their ideas of what they want their relationship to be, what their relationship can be in the future, they are very different. And in the beginning of the novel, neither of them really realizes or fully understands that. They both always intend to be together. Neither of them is trying to exit the relationship at all, but their ideas of what that togetherness is very different. And as we get through the narrative, then it becomes more and more clear that they have very different ideas of what being together means and looks like. And it's sad.
It is sad. It is. And there's a moment quite early on in your book where Lucy says, "No kind word exists for us, or none that I have yet found." And I think that's a really brilliant way to articulate their relationship. But what I found interesting about the way that you explored it is that you don't allow for anybody to shame them. You don't give room for that. And although historically it wouldn't have been acceptable at that time, they're hiding in plain sight because they're very close friends, you don't actually allow for that shame from society to actually seep into your story of them in the novel. I wondered if that was was a conscious choice.
Yeah. I think we have seen enough books about people who are sad because they are queer, who are shamed by society, who experience trauma and pain and rejection and violence from society.
Yeah.
We've seen enough of that. Like, that wasn't something that I wanted to engage with particularly. Like, each of them, they know who they are. They're in a relationship with the person they love, and both of them believe at all times, they believe there is a future for them together, and are both determined to kind of work towards that.
Yes.
I was not interested in seeing them be hurt at all in that way.
Yeah.
That's not what the book is about.
No.
And there is a sort of accidental-ish coming out, but the character that is on the other side of that is a person who, by that point in the narrative, has been established as a very deeply moral, deeply good, loving, compassionate person.
Yeah.
And even though it's not accepted by society, she knows this. She knows her friend and loves her and will accept her for who she is.
Yeah.
And that was important. And it was important to me that whenever a character in the novel is being quote unquote progressive, whether that was John about mental health, or whether it's characters when they're encountering these two women who are in a relationship, it was important to me that there was a reason. They're not just progressive because I, in the 21st century, say so. They're being progressive and having these progressive ideas because of something in their character, something in who they are, helps them to understand and to think in that way that is contrary to what society at the time thinks. Like, that was really important. It needed to feel really grounded and really real as a response, not just, I'm just doing this to be nice.
No, but it is such a beautiful moment when that happens, because I imagine the fear that would have put into that character of, oh my God, like, where is this going to go, and what is this person going to do with this information? And to just be like, you know, not even a big fuss is made. It's just, okay, like, I had a feeling, like, it's what it is, like. And I think that's so sort of, I don't know what the word would be, it's so sort of radical for that time.
That character is kind of quietly radical, the one who is being on the other side of the coming out. She is kind of a radical character in a lot of ways. She's made choices which society would also look slightly sideways at, and she lives in a way that possibly is a little bit different, but I wanted it to feel loving and real at the same time.
I really want to talk about the character of Alice. I think Alice is such a brilliant character, and I would love for you, first of all, to tell the listeners about the sort of social hierarchy of this book and where Alice kind of slots into that.
Okay, so Alice is a lady's maid, which she's quite young for being a lady's maid, but she's been specifically trained by a woman who takes in young girls into her house and trains them up, which was something that was not uncommon in the time period. And she goes to work for the character of Eliza in Whitby as her lady's maid. And Eliza, as a character, is the sort of person who would absolutely want to give a young woman a chance to prove herself.
Yes.
And she's lower class. She's working class. Her father was a fisherman. Her mother was a housemaid who now has a shop. Her mother and sister run a shop. So that's where Alice is in terms of the social hierarchy. But a lady's maid is an upper servant, so she's quite well paid, she's well trained. It's a really good place. But I think I wanted to introduce that kind of other view of this society. I read the book Longbourn by Joe Baker a few years ago when it came out, which is about this from this point of view of the servants in Pride and Prejudice. And ever since, I've been really interested in the servants in a house. What are they seeing? What are they thinking? And obviously, you know, we all love Downton Abbey, right? That aspect, you know, what is life like for them? How do they see events? How is it different, or how is it the same? And also, Lucy is kind of lower. She's not upper class. Yeah. She's sort of more in the middle. She's kind of genteel but poor. She is trying to equip herself for a bit of a career. So she and Alice have they're a bit closer together. They have a bit more of a sympathy, because Lucy is kind of always aware that she could end up being an upper servant herself at some point. So she's trying to build herself a career to be a writer, so that she doesn't have that experience, because she is still aware of the divide between the people who serve and the people who are served. And to cross that divide there's a lot of class anxiety there at the time. Yes. Yeah. But Alice really does see things differently. Alice has the sight Alice
Yes.
is psychic to some degree. She has psychic visions, she has dreams, and then in the beginning of the novel, those dreams start to seep into her waking life. And the fact that she's this kind of working class girl from Yorkshire who can see things that nobody else can see, she knows things that nobody else can know, is quite, I don't want to say fun, because a lot of the things she sees are terrible, but is quite an interesting thing to do, because she can't express to anybody, we shouldn't do this, we shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
Because she doesn't have that social position or power. So there's a real tension there for her.
Yeah.
And exploring that throughout the course of the narrative it's intense. It's a lot.
I mean, I loved the character of Alice, and I loved all the class anxiety stuff. I can't get enough of that. And as you just said, Alice has the sight, and it's also what her mum and her nana have as well. And throughout the book, I feel like there's a big exploration of sort of science and medicine versus superstition, and there's also a sort of an exploration of religion and sort of various ways that people that sit within these different sort of realms of thinking, how they perceive evil, and how they might want to like ward it off. I don't know what the best way to explain that is, but I wondered what drew you specifically into exploring this sight that Alice and her family have, that sort of psychic ability, where that came from.
I don't know. This is another one of those like muse moments. I think I liked the idea of, because Alice is very practical, down to earth sort of person, apart from in this one aspect, but she struggles to accept it about herself, and I found that also quite interesting. But I wanted, throughout the narrative, I wanted the reader to be warned. Like, we might be having this slightly tense picnic with the vicar or something, but at the same time there's this really deep undercurrent of dread of all of this, nice little world is going to be exploded. And Alice is a big part of that, because she's having these visions at the same time as there's almost this, like, Lucy and Eliza are experiencing these kind of like almost domestic issues a little bit in the first part of the book, and it's very Victorian. We're having like those anxieties, but underneath it all is Alice, who's seeing these terrible things and experiencing these terrible visions and trying to ward them off with like folk remedies and herbal medicine, because her mother has an apothecary shop. And later on in the novel, the dread is when Dracula starts to appear, because as a writer, it's such a gift. You can put a tall, pale man in black in the back of a scene, and the reader knows, oh, that's him, what's going to happen. But in the early part of the novel, Alice is the dread. Yeah, she's that horror, that fear. That was kind of fun to do.
Yeah, I can imagine. God, I have so many questions that I want to ask you, and we're not going to get through them all, and I'm gutted. But I really want to come back to, we've spoken about yearning, but there's also, as we sort of hinted at before, there's a big exploration of sexuality. But I think also in Bram Stoker's Dracula, there is also an exploration of sort of sexuality and desire, maybe sort of under the surface. And I wondered how you feel your novel speaks to those themes.
So Bram Stoker's Dracula, the sexual desire is a lot about like the monstrous feminine, all the female vampires in Dracula. And now I don't want to spoil you, knowing that you haven't read it.
That is fine. It's fine. I've made this choice.
All of the female vampires who appear in Bram Stoker's Dracula are quite voracious. They're quite,
I've been told this,
sexually aggressive.
Yeah.
And for the time, that was really shocking. That's monstrous. That's part of what makes them monstrous. And I have not gone with that, because I do not believe in the monstrous feminine, because it's the 21st century.
Yes.
But there is elements of Dracula's kind of relationship with Jonathan Harker in the very beginning. There are some like queer coded moments, very much. And later on, some of the kind of little band of brothers, heroes who are taking down Dracula, there's definitely some vibes. There's some vibes. And here we go with the spoilers, when Dracula bites Mina Harker, Jonathan's wife, it is very much as if she's been like seduced, and Jonathan is dealing with the fact that his wife has been tainted by this seduction. So it's a very different idea of female sexuality. We have we have Mina Harker, who's like very pure and very innocent and is trying to be seduced away, and then the female vampires who are quite sexually predatory. And obviously, writing in the 21st century in a female-centered book, I'm not making that kind of binary, this is how female sexuality is and exists. I didn't lean into it too much, into that as an exploration, because it's much more, they just love each other.
Yeah.
Women, they're just in love, and that's kind of it. There is like yearning and longing because they're physically separated. Lucy and Mafalda are physically separated for most of the novel, so there is a lot of yearning, but it doesn't have that kind of charge that there is in Bram Stoker's Dracula. Just, it's a different era. We're not shocked by women having desire anymore at all in any context, really. So it's a very different thing, I think.
Yeah, definitely. The last thing I sort of want to compare between obviously your novel and Bram Stoker's Dracula is, of course, that they're both epistolary novels, which is a word that I'm not good with, but I think I've said it right. But obviously epistolary it means a novel that's made up of letters and journal entries and all that kind of stuff, and sort of correspondence between characters and things. I'm saying that for any listener that might not know it, because I came to the meaning of this word very late. But I wondered why you wanted to keep to that form, and how you found it. Was it quite enjoyable? Did it sort of limit you in certain ways?
Yeah, it is. Initially, it can be a little bit limiting because you can't end on a cliffhanger in the same way. You can't end a chapter on a cliffhanger in the same way. So I did have to learn to like get around that. But I started doing it because I remember this like set of thoughts very clearly, very early on in the beginning. At the time, I didn't feel particularly confident in writing in the third person. A lot of my favorite books are written in the first person. So I thought, okay, well, I'll write this book in the first person. Oh, Dracula's all in letters. I'll do the same thing. And that is how I ended up, as a novice writer who had never written a whole book before, writing 12 or 13 different voices in the whole thing, in different styles, in different, psychiatric reports, letters, and the difference between, this person's writing to this person, to that person, what do you want to hide, what do you want to reveal, versus writing in their own diary, and then keeping the chronology all like accurate. It's not. I had to put a little note in there because it's not chronological, but then neither is Dracula. So it felt like the right form to use, and I do stand by it, but it was not easy. It was not easy.
Imagine.
But having come out the other side, I am very much a better writer now. Like I'm quite glad almost that I didn't know what this would be like going in. But I've definitely come out on the other side with a much better understanding of how to convey character voice in all sorts of different ways, whether they're like speaking and it's being recorded, or whether they're writing in all these different contexts. Yeah, it was a really steep learning curve, but I think it's worked really well. And yeah, having that parallel with Dracula just feels kind of right. Almost.
Yeah. I mean, you've done an incredible job, like you said, carving out these various voices and the styles that they're written in. I think I can't imagine how difficult that must have been, but yeah, I think you've done a wonderful job.
Thank you. I wanted the reader to know who was writing from within, like, under a sentence. I didn't want them to feel, oh, who is this again? And having to keep going back and check. So I hope I've achieved that.
You absolutely have, yes. I think finally, before I ask for your recommendation, I do want to ask for your thoughts on why you think as a sort of collective, we're so culturally obsessed with vampires. And I think what's interesting with Dracula and with other vampire stories is that, I mean, I don't know because I haven't actually read Dracula, but in terms of your story, I don't feel like you're leading us to be attracted to this man or to believe that there's anything sort of good about him. Whereas I feel like in a lot of vampire stories, it's like, oh, they're so sexy, they're so attractive, like we're so drawn to them.
So happy that you've said that, because like I am down for a sexy vampire. Like I grew up, I watched the Vampire Diaries when it was first out, right? And there is a very big nod to the Vampire Diaries in the book because I couldn't help it. But like, I'm down for a sexy vampire, that's great. But Count Dracula is not sexy.
No.
And I wanted to make that really clear. He's not sexy in the original novel. He is not sexy in my book.
No.
He is, no. So you can have a sexy vampire. We love them. That's, I think, part of the big fascination and, the the whole like biting the neck, and she's in her nightgown and all of that stuff. But Dracula himself, I will absolutely die on this hill, Dracula is not sexy. There are other literary vampires who are, like Carmilla from 1872. She's quite sexy. John Polidori's the vampire. Lord Ruthven, he's quite sexy. But Dracula, no. Absolutely not. I refuse.
And you are right to refuse.
Thank you. Yeah.
As soon as he appeared, I was like, I don't like this guy.
No, you shouldn't. You shouldn't like him. He is very scary. He is a very scary man in life and is a very scary man in death.
Yeah, terrifying. Well, thank you. I would love to ask you, before I'm sneaking in another one, I'm sorry, but I'd love to find out what is next for you, and if there was another classic that you'd ever be eager to explore and put your own sort of interpretation on of. That doesn't make sense, but I hope you understand what I mean.
Maybe in the future, because that would be quite cool. But my next book, I don't know how much I'm allowed to talk about my next book. I'm in edits for this now, but it's about Vikings, cursed archaeology, and female rage.
Oh, brilliant.
And there is like Norse saga influences, which I know like people will be less familiar with than with Dracula. But yeah, so it's not like a reimagining or a re-envisioning or anything, but there is a very strong link between the Norse sagas and my next book. But yeah,
this
Vikings,
sounds amazing.
Cursed archaeology, female rage. So much female rage.
I can't wait for this. I'm so excited. I just want to say how much I loved The Brides. I think it's such an incredible novel.
Thank you.
And I think you can read and love this whether you are familiar with Dracula or whether you're not. I don't necessarily think you need to have read that, but I do think maybe it would be interesting for me to read Dracula and then go back and read your book.
Do it, and let me know how that experience is for you.
I need to.
Yeah. Do it.
But finally, can I finish by asking for a recommendation? What would you like to recommend to the listeners?
Absolutely. So I want to recommend a book that's coming out really soon that I was lucky to read an advance copy of. It's called Honeysuckle by Bar Fridman Tell, and it's a reimagining of Welsh legends of the Flower Girl, but it is so beautiful. It is so beautifully written, and it is just easily one of the best books I've read possibly ever. And it comes out really soon. There's some rage. There's some rage in there.
That is next up on my reading list because I'm interviewing Bar next week for the pod.
Are you? Yeah. Oh my God, you're going to have the best time. Yeah.
Oh, I can't wait to read that now. You've got me really excited for it. Thank you so much for joining me today, Charlotte. I've absolutely loved this conversation. I loved your book, and I can't wait to read whatever it is that you give us next.
Thank you so much, and thank you very much for having me.
No, thank you. And for the listeners, if you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. The Brides is out next week, so you can get your last minute pre-orders in. And if not, head on into a bookshop next week and go grab yourselves your copy. You will not regret it. It is such a brilliant book. And then when you finish reading it, come and talk to me because I want to talk to more people about it. And if you want to give us a follow, you can do so at A Pair of Bookends Pod on Instagram and at A Pair of Bookends on Twitter and TikTok. You can also get more content over on Patreon. And Charlotte, where can the listeners find you on socials?
So I'm on Instagram at Charlotte Writes History, and I'm on Blue Sky, which is just charlotte.cross. Blue Sky.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And listeners, thank you so much for listening. And thank you once again, Charlotte, for joining me. Bye.